2, 1. Marisa, our guest is here. we are honored and happy to welcome Mr. Sean Bauman with IMMY Diagnostics. Sean, welcome to the Ogle Show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Are you really excited? Everyone says that. We're never 100% sure.
No, I'm excited. To get a compliment from the Lost Ogle is like a rare treat. So
don't get used to it.
I'm not.
But I think there's lots of questioning. Yeah, no. Yeah. So Marisa and I, we talked about this a little bit in the intro. I was at the pod. I have my card actually right here that I got at the event.
Yeah.
It was on 2/22, and I was just incredibly impressed with the whole operation, how organized it was. I don't see how you guys are able to vaccinate. I think it's like 10,000 people in a day. So I was like, we need to have somebody from them on this podcast to talk about it. Before we get into all that, though, I do have one question for you, just a little bit about IMMY Diagnostics. Let's say we hop in a time machine and we're back in like fall of 2019. And I ask you, what's IMMY Diagnostics? What would you say? Because right now, I think people like associate you guys with coronavirus testing and the vaccines, but you guys do something totally different to that, right?
Right. So we're a manufacturing company. We manufacture diagnostic tests for infectious diseases that we sell all over the globe. And we have been since 1979. This is a family business that my mom and dad started, and my brother and I run it now. So our background is manufacturing. Infectious disease is kind of our specialty. We don't do a whole lot of business in Oklahoma. The tests we make are for folks that are severely immunocompromised. So think big cancer centers, think HIV. So we don't have those huge cancer centers here. We don't have a large HIV population. So you get big urban areas are our big customer focused areas, but then also sub-Saharan Africa is where most of the HIV patients are. And so, you rewind back to 2019, we're talking about how do we grow our diagnostic manufacturing capabilities and how do we expand deeper into all the different markets that we're in. That's what we were thinking about.
Right. How many employees do you have like here in Oklahoma?
So we have around 100 employees. Well, if you're talking about 2019 or if you're talking now.
Yeah.
So we had back in 2019, we had around 80, 90 employees, something like that here in Oklahoma. We've since nearly doubled with COVID and all the endeavors with that. And it's been a crazy ride, to be honest with you, over the last year.
Yeah. So if I remember, you guys first kind of got involved in the COVID efforts with the testing element, right?
Yeah.
So how did that play out, I guess? Like, were you like raising your hands like, we can help, we do this stuff already to a degree?
So it was almost a year ago exactly that myself and a few others from our sales team we were in Lugano, Italy. And we were there for a trade show, and we ended up having to change our flight to leave. Instead of leaving out of Milan, we had to leave out of Zurich. Because if you remember back a year ago, Milan and northern Italy, that was the hot spot in Europe. And it was really kind of eerie because we caught our train out of Lugano to Zurich, came from Milan. And if you've ever been to Europe on trains, you know that there's always a lot of people on the trains. We got on the train that came out of Milan and there was nobody on board. It was very eerie, just a weird kind of thing. And we got the heck out of there. We ended up leaving the day early just to make sure we could get home. So that was almost a year ago to the day. And a buddy of mine at Norman Regional Hospital, he was talking to me about all the challenges they were facing with PPE and how much PPE they're burning through. Because remember, at the time, you didn't have a way to really know if a patient did or didn't have COVID. And so all the while, everybody's donning and doffing all this PPE and going through crazy amounts. And you remember people are going all over the country trying to get PPE and making sure we had enough for our own folks. And then we started turning to the community. Can we make our own PPE? And I was a part of some of the groups talking about how do you use the Tyvek material that you wrap houses in? Can you use that to create gowns? And I mean,
Right.
just trying to get, it's a bit, I mean, zombie apocalypse type thinking, but what are the resources that we have right here that we can turn into some protective materials? And in fact, my family, we ended up partnering with Norman Regional, and we started making face shields out of vinyl that you would use like clear vinyl that you'd use on a boat, let's say.
Right.
And so we turned our kitchen into a manufacturing facility, my kids and I, and we were, at night creating some PPE for the local hospital. So, but what was the real problem behind the PPE was the lack of access to testing. So, in the hospital, they would collect a sample and then it would get shipped out of state. And it would take days to a week to come back. And man, that was super frustrating for everybody involved. I mean, that really shut down a lot of things in our community, and the hospitals were really suffering for it. But if they knew the patient did or didn't have COVID, then they can respond appropriately, and they wouldn't have to waste that much PPE. Remember, a year ago, hardly anybody had COVID in Oklahoma, right? We had a few people.
Right. That we knew about, right?
That we knew about,
yeah,
right.
'Cause we had no testing.
Right.
Basically.
But if you came in with the sniffles, you had COVID, right? I mean, that was, you were assumed to have COVID until proven otherwise. And so we got into testing just to help Norman Regional, because the last thing that I wanted was that if my mom or my dad needed to go to the hospital, or if I did, anybody needed to go to the hospital, that there was a place that they could go. And that was the scariest situation in my mind, that you can imagine. It doesn't have to be COVID. It could be a car accident, and the hospital's full. And I mean, gosh, that's just a terrible thing to kind of imagine. And so I've got smart scientists that work here at IMMY, and we had the brain power to do it. We had a little bit of equipment to be able to do that, and some resources to spin up testing pretty quickly. And it's kind of crazy, but within 10 days from the time we decided to do testing, we reported our first patient result, literally 10 days.
Wow.
And that process to be certified by the State Department of Health and, put all those safety protocols in place, that normally takes 3 to 6 months for most startup companies. And, but we'd had some experience with clinical labs. We actually had owned a clinical lab in our past. And so we were a bit familiar, and our manufacturing, we're selling tests into clinical labs. So we knew, how it all worked. And
so basically in a span of 10 days, you guys created your own tests? Was there like sharing in the scientific community? Was it like, you're working with some other lab that has, it's such a, I worked in the lab industry. It's very complex. People don't know how big and important it truly is. And, all the stuff that goes into it, but that's just, 10 days seems impossible. You know what I'm saying?
It was crazy. And I've got to give a ton of credit to my team and their how agile they were to try to figure out how to solve the problem. No was not an answer. I mean, we had to get to a yes. And that was really challenging from a supply chain perspective. We didn't develop the test. We used the CDC test, and so we were able to get those reagents that we need. But then all of the other things, as you might imagine, that go into making a test work, you had supply chain problems that were everybody's fighting for those same things. And and FDA did open up allowable alternatives in some cases. So we were able to pivot and validate new materials and new processes along the way as everything kind of evolved. But really, I mean, that was a big part of the innovation, was being in terms of supply chain. So this vendor sold out. We were placing orders with multiples of vendors, just that with the hopes that one of them would hit. Yeah. And the other thing that we did is we built our test on an open platform, right? If it was a platform that, okay, you've got to take this one cartridge and you put it into this one machine and you can only buy it from this one company, that was not going to be scalable during this time. And so to have a platform that was open really enabled us to pivot and move and be agile through the early days of testing. And then the challenge was, how do we scale it more and more and more? Because then you have Norman Regional, we had them taken care of, but then there's other hospitals in the region that needed testing. And so that we quickly started to exceed our demand and our ability to supply the test results. And that's where I've got to give a huge shout out to local partners. Okay. I called a buddy of mine at the University of Oklahoma at the Health Sciences Center. And I said, hey, I know you've got this certain piece of equipment in your department. Is there any way I can borrow it for a while? Literally, I mean, he made one phone call to the VP of research. The next day, it was being delivered and set up and installed in our lab by one of his postdocs.
I picture in the back of like a station wagon, driving down I-35 or something like that.
No, you're not far off, right? And then, working with the Department of Health, are there other of these pieces of equipment that we needed? Are they sitting in basements in different places? And the Department of Health, they found a few of these units that weren't being used at OSBI. And next thing you know, we've got National Guard, driving them down from different locations across the state and in their own cars, right? Not in like a military vehicle, but in their own cars. And here you go. And then we ended up buying some pieces of equipment to fill it out. And so now we have a whole room full of these instruments that all do the same thing, and it's all COVID testing. But then there was kind of an inflection point in May, June, in that time frame. I don't know if you remember that time frame, but I got pissed off because you hear the president talking about, hey, if you need a COVID test, go get a COVID test. It's free. It's available. Just go get one.
Yeah, it wasn't that easy.
No, I mean, I knew where I personally could get one. I had a swab in my office. I could shove it up my nose and just walk it to the next room. Right. But you really didn't have any place for somebody to just go up and get a test, just like the president was talking about. And I mean, unless you want to go to the ER, and we're not going to the ER.
Not the place you want to go to during a pandemic.
No. And then there was a weird stigma, but the other place that you were told to go was go to the county health department. Well, my thing is kind of, I don't go to the county health department. We have health insurance, we don't do that. And so but you could go there. They were maxed out on, you'd be hard pressed to get an appointment. So then we did something, I think in retrospect, it's like kind of crazy how it all came together. Literally, a colleague of mine and we went to eat at Chick-Fil-A. This is a true story. I have the video to prove it. I hopped in the back seat of the drive-thru. We're in the drive-thru. I hopped in the back seat and I had my phone and I recorded the entire drive-thru experience. I took the video back to my team. We're all Chick-fil-A fans. And I said, this is what we want to build for a drive-thru testing. And simple, easy, fast, accurate results, all those things. It's the same as Chick-fil-A, right? I mean, the Chick-fil-A line can be a freaking mile long, and it still only takes 15 minutes max to get through it. And you know what? They're nice to you when you get up there, and your order's always right. Yeah. Like, it doesn't get jacked up. It's always right. So that's what we wanted. We just modeled that. It wasn't rocket science.
There was probably somebody in your first meeting like, oh, we don't have fryers. Like, what are we going to have to get like a soda machine? Like, what are we doing here, boss? Then you had to explain just logistics. We're not actually. Did you mandate that your employees, so they had to say my pleasure? Like when people were like getting their test, thank you, my pleasure.
We didn't mandate that, but that did come out of some people's mouths. That's for sure. But because people were very anxious to get it. I mean, I don't know if you all have had a swab done, but man, it goes like impossibly far into your brain.
Yeah, I've had about 4 or 5 over the summer. Like, it's one of those things I'm not feeling good a couple of times. And it really was like a pain in the ass to try to find a place to do it. And I ended up doing the health department thing, like the drive-through testing. you had to schedule your time, and your appointment's like 3 days later. You don't get the results for another 2 to 3 days. I've done the urgent care route. But yeah, I guess, but then as the summer went on, the testing became more available, right?
It did. Yeah. And that's where we started putting locations all over Oklahoma. In fact, towards the end of the school year, we went around to, I think it was like 20, I don't even remember the number of school districts that we ended up visiting, but a whole bunch of them. It was almost like a road show, and we had a bunch of people in the vans, and they just went town to town and set up these mobile pods for teachers, and we had private pods for them, and then kind of public facing pods for just anybody to be able to go and get a test. And then we had some regular locations, and at the end of kind of when things started to wind down, IMMY Labs actually did 20% of all of the COVID testing in all of Oklahoma. That includes like West and DLO, and and we did 0 in March of 2020.
And now after spending all that time, it's not that testing's going away. I mean, I assume like this virus seems like it wants to hang around for a while, but now all the focus is on vaccines. And that's really where you guys, in my opinion, have really stepped up. As I participated once again in the big, what they called super pods. Is that the name?
We called it the Galactopod.
Galactopod.
And I will show you, here, this is actually a bottle of champagne that the team, after we did that day, but you see, there's our little logo,
That's the one I was at. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And in fact, we were kind of joking, how cool would it be to get like the most famous Oklahoma astronaut to come to the pod, right? And we literally found the phone number, found a connection, got the phone number for General Stafford. And he wasn't able to make it. He was out of the state. Yeah.
My grandparents babysitted him when he was a kid. They were like because he's from like Weatherford, I guess, and they were from Weatherford, and I guess my grandma they babysitted the staff. It was like it's our everything that would always get brought up, we babysitted Thomas Stafford back in the day. So,
that's such like an Oklahoma connection right there.
Yeah, that's great.
So I remember how my kind of it's like since I was in phase 2, as phase 2 was opening up. And so I started paying attention, and Marisa and I's mutual friend, Tony, he sent me a link to a Twitter account that was, it's a vaccine alerts. Okay.
Yeah.
And where they just kind of stream out as openings become available, because it is kind of, you have to kind of be quick to the draw, I think, to get one scheduled. And I followed that account, and I set up to get alerts to my phone whenever they posted updates. And like on Sunday afternoon, it's like 12 appointments available with IMMY Lab. And I'm like, I'm like on my computer typing real quick. And I was able to get in that night at like 8:45. And after even clicked to get that appointment, like the line anxiety started kicking in. I hate lines more than anyone. I don't like super big, large groups. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be, I'm doing this Monday night at 8:45. Yeah. Maybe and it's in Norman, I live in North Oklahoma City. Maybe I'll get home by midnight. I'm just thinking, I'm expecting the worst. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. The analogy, I think I was thinking it'd be like a TSA like experience where you're just waiting. I'm waiting. There's an old person in front of you that can't take off their shoes or whatever. You're just like, oh, come on. And it was once again the exact opposite. You pull up and it was very organized and orderly. You have the cops kind of directing traffic, telling you the areas to park. I remember getting the notice, like, don't arrive more than 10 minutes early. And as I walked up, it was at the Embassy Suites, and it was like an award show, and there was this big group of people who were like on the reserve list, all kind of waiting. And you're like walking up, looking at them, and they're almost like cheering you on. And they're like, no more appointment. And you're telling me your appointment time. And one person there was like 20 minutes there, and like, nope, you can't go in. And I'm like, oh yeah, you didn't read your. And then it was just like like you're almost having to run through the line. I'm like, people are chasing you with like their iPads, putting in your information. And then it's like very orderly. They put you in these big long rows. You sit down, and within a couple of minutes, a cart comes by, gives you your vaccine, and you wait, and you're gone. And the entire time I'm thinking, this is really cool, but like what in the world goes into planning this and pulling this off? Like, did you guys have to do mock runs, rehearsals? Like, tell us about this process. How did you figure this out?
So once again, it kind of started from the place of being kind of pissed off at the status quo, and so we decided let's go figure out how to do this better than everybody else. And the local county health department at the time was doing 1,000, the 800 to 1,000 people in a day, and I just threw out the idea of let's 10x that. Let's try to figure out how to 10x that. Because that would really move the needle in terms of getting us to done. And somebody on my team brought up the idea of let's figure out how we can vaccinate enough Oklahomans to where by Memorial Day that forget top 10 in the country. Let's be number 1, and let's get to Memorial Day and vaccinate everybody. And so my team, we started thinking about how could we do that? How could we help in that endeavor? And it's these Galactopods, if you will, that really move the needle, in my opinion. Not to say that the smaller pods aren't valuable, but it gets to a certain point in the population where we need to vaccinate millions of people, and 900 is not cutting it. We need to, let's do 10,000 in a day. Let's get to that point. And we started our first day, we did 100. Then I think I was on a Friday, and then on the following Monday, we did 1,000. And each time so remember our manufacturing background, right? So think lean manufacturing, continuous flow. I don't know if you know anything about some of those principles.
When I worked, DLO is a Six Sigma company, so I know all about I know all about that stuff. Probably too much than I want to know. So
I mean, that's what we're thinking. How do we get as many shots in arms in a given fixed period of time? And so we looked at drive-through, because drive-through had been very successful for testing, but could drive-through actually work for vaccinations? And we decided, no, you can't vaccinate as many people in a drive-through as you can in an indoor, kind of bring them in, sit them down. And we came up with the idea of let's bring them in. Each person has to wait at least 15 minutes. Let's just bring them in and sit them down, and then we'll come to them. That would be faster than the patient going from each kind of station to station. Yeah. And in our model, you need to be able to vaccinate 4 patients every 5 minutes. And we've done this enough now that's kind of the magic number in our model. And so that's how we can scale. How many rows do you want? And what space can accommodate that? And it's not just the physical room, it's the parking lot and the traffic and a lot of other things that go into it. But and so we did 100, then 1,000. I think then we did about 3,500, and then we did a 5,000 day, and it was like, yeah. And then finally we came and did this Galactopod, and it took about a little over a week of planning. But I'll tell you, we've been working just hand in hand with the Cleveland County Health Department through this whole thing, and they've just been a fantastic partner. And once we, kind of got the green light to that we could do it, we could get enough vaccine. That was one of the that was the first question. Can we get enough vaccine?
Yeah.
And we were able to get that much vaccine without too much work. And then we pulled it off with, you have Cleveland County Health Department that was a partner, and then you had OU, Goddard Health down here in Norman. They were a partner and brought some nurses and other staff, and then Norman Regional, which is our local hospital, brought some folks. And so, and then, there were restaurants that chipped in to provide meals. This was a community event.
Right.
And if you remember,
how many people were involved? Like, how many people to pull off a Galactopod? How many volunteers or employees does it take?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that was over 12 hours. That was a crazy long day, and we had to break it up into shifts. We didn't do just one shift across the whole pod, and so it took about twice as many people as we think it will take now. But it took a little over 200 people to pull that off. But here's a point of reference that I think is pertinent. Remember the FEMA pod that was supposed to come to Oklahoma? They were going to do 6,000 people, in 12 hours, but it was going to take 450
wow.
personnel. And so what we've started to really realize, and we've looked at other large pods across the country, is our method is actually the most efficient use of resources than we've seen out there. We think now we can do 10,000 in 6 hours with about 200 staff. So
wow.
The same 200, actually a little bit less, but we can do it in 6 hours. The reason that's important is how many days in a row can you pull off a 15, 16-hour day? I mean, that's how long I was up there at that pod.
Right.
Maybe it's 2-3 days, and then I'm just wiped out. What we need to find out is, how do we do that? Can we do 10,000 a day, 5, 6, 7 days a week? Now we're talking about moving the needle, right? And space is now the challenge.
Is that, well, now, I think yesterday the Biden, or sometime this week, the Biden administration announced that there will be enough vaccines, like the supply will be there for basically every American to be vaccinated by Memorial Day. Do you foresee here in Oklahoma with these Galactopods, like how long out do you guys project for every Oklahoma that wants a vaccine, that wants to be vaccinated? When will that finally happen?
I think we're getting closer to making that a reality, where Galactopods is kind of the new normal, and that's what I'm pushing right now with the Department of Health, and they're fully on board and supportive of that. It's about finding the right it's about location. It's about vaccine supply, which you're right, there's more supply coming into the state, and then it's about partnerships to provide the personnel. And I'll tell you, there's all of the major healthcare providers in the Oklahoma City metro are all on board. They're tired, right? They've been doing pods 3 and 4 days a week, some of them, and with the same amount of staff that it would take to do, 5,000 people.
Right.
And they're getting, 1,000-ish people vaccinated. And so their people are tired. And is there a way that, you could imagine one large healthcare system that, okay, we're going to do Monday, and then another large healthcare system, we're going to have the staff to do Tuesday, and you start piecing that together, and then, man, next thing you know, we've got, daily Galactopods.
Right. There's just so many when you mention, it's just like there's just so many moving parts to all of this. Jeez, it makes me paranoid and anxious just thinking about the amount of planning. As Marisa will point out, I'm a very organized person, right, Marisa? So no, not very.
No.
My favorite emails from Patrick are the ones at 3 a.m. like, hey, can you check this thing? And then you try to check the thing, and you're like, did you even do the thing? And he was like, no, I guess I didn't. I'm sorry. So
I was depressed. I sent Sean an email like yesterday. I'm like, hey, here are the details of the pod. I was like, well, usually I send these like 30 minutes before, and I was all like, I sent it like a day in advance. Anyway, so for the Galactopods, did you kidnap somebody from Chick-Fil-A to help with that too, or is that because that's what everyone on social media is like now? It's an urban legend that I think you guys have bought Chick-Fil-A again or something.
We did not because we learned a lot through testing, right? And we actually had the owner of the local Chick-fil-A come out and critique our drive-through testing model and say, hey, what are we doing wrong? Help us be, the best that you can imagine. And he literally came out and gave us pointers, and we put those into practice. And we had him come out for our Galactopod as well, and just look at the process, tell us where to improve, because ultimately it's about helping more Oklahomans faster, and we all win, right? Let's get to our summer being back to normal and just living and not being so afraid. And that's what these, I'm sure you witnessed it when you were at the pod, but hope is abounding. That's what they leave there with hope. And that's what's been missing for so many people that literally have been locked up in their homes since March and have been scared to death to hug their grandkids, and they've lost a year of their lives in some respects. And they leave there with hope, as they should, right? This is the beginning of the end.
You really could feel the vibe of optimism in there.
Yeah.
And one of my other concerns was like, hey, is this going to be safe? A lot of people like, does it go against that, the social distancing, not going in large groups? But for one, I was thinking, well, everyone here wants to get the vaccine fast. Like this is like the first one for phase 2. So I just started assuming everyone here has probably been pretty responsible, right? But face masks are encouraged. You have to keep that distance. There was never a point where I felt like uncomfortable in the process. But really, once that nurse came by, I'm like, which arm, left arm, and put it right in there. It was like you did almost feel like a weird weight kind of lifting off your shoulders a little bit. Yeah. The one thing I've been having to like kind of contain myself from not like still being disciplined, because I got that, I'm like, oh, come on, it's not really 14 days before that first shot protection kind of kicks in, but I've been having to do Googling, like, is 10 days okay? But now they're saying, it's day 7, you're doing all those weird Google searches, and then the autofill makes you think other people have done the same ones. Anyway, and then I guess I have to go back. So now I've got my first shot, and then my card here says, I think my next one is the 15th. So are the second shots events, are these going to be are these Galactopods too? Is that right? Am I doing another one of these, I guess?
You are. We'll have a roughly 10,000 appointments that day if people haven't rescheduled to some other later date, if it doesn't work for them. But, the same partners will be involved to actually execute the plan. And I anticipate that it will come off without a hitch. Again, I think we've kind of got everything really a well-oiled machine now. And now it's how do we expand that, to be honest with you, to the other healthcare providers so they can utilize the same technique, because certainly we can't do this all ourselves. We've got the method, we've got the technology, and it's about training now. It's about passing this along to all of our other neighbors, healthcare providers in the area.
Have you had any pushback? Because I remember hearing stories about like the big vaccination event in LA at Dodger Stadium, how anti-vaccine activists showed up and basically shut it down. Have you had any issues with that, or anybody trying to contact you and stop anything like that?
I'm going to knock on wood, but no, we haven't had that happen yet, and I hope it doesn't happen. We've had, we had some folks from National Guard present. Local county sheriff and police force were there. If something like that did happen, they would be there to help kind of squash that. But there are so many people that just want this vaccine desperately that I'm not sure the security would have to do anything. It might be the public there that would take it into their own hands. I'm going to tell you a story that was really pretty darn cool. The worst part of a vaccine event, the worst part, right, is at the end of the day, we've got a few doses that are left over, right? And we've gotten down to where it's literally single digit number of doses. And why is that so important? Because you have a certain amount of time that it needs to get into somebody's arm before we have to throw it away. And so let's say we overshot and we had 200 extra doses. Well, we've already worked many hours, and to add, a bunch of hours onto the end of an already long day would be really challenging. So the worst part about any vaccine pod is when you have to go out and say, hey, all right, we have the people on our wait list, and we have to tell like 99% of them, there's no shot for you today. I'm sorry. But here's what happened on that night, though. We literally had 2 doses, right? Two.
Yeah, because there were like dozens and dozens of people out there. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So at the end, there was, I'm going to say, an order of about 80 or so people, and I was a little bit worried. I went out there with some of the team that was going to make the announcement. We had made sure National Guard was present and police, just in case. We don't know how this is going to go, right? This is the most people that we've ever done, and we called out the first name. The crowd started, and we told them there was only 2 doses, right? The crowd started cheering.
Wow.
Right? Called off the second name. They cheered and were like, yeah, congratulations. And then, I just got chills again thinking about it, because that could have easily gone the other way of a bunch of just disappointed, pissed off people that it's hard to get a vaccine appointment, and they were, that close to getting it. And rather than being sour about it, they were happy for their neighbor getting the opportunity, somebody they didn't know.
Yeah, that is something. Cool. Yeah, because I remember once again, it was like walking the red carpet, walking into that thing, and all the people who were on the list, they're like out there under, the overhanging thing, whatever. Yeah. All like watching people go in, and you hear people talking about being on it. I know you're super busy. One last question before we get off here. With talking to all your scientists, all your people, all that stuff, do you have any idea of like how this all kind of ends, or vaccines for this, kind of the new normal, like getting a flu shot each year? When do you guys start? I guess when do the people at IMMY start focusing once again on getting diagnostic testing to people in other countries to help with those other things? So when does that happen? Do you have any idea?
Well, first of all, we never quit getting diagnostic testing to other countries. My team jokes about it because I always call it the power of and. I want to go do what we're already doing, and I want to do this, and I want to do this. And so we never stopped in that regard. But when does it end? I think it's probably here to stay. I mean, it will be in our population at some level. It could, and depending on the strains that are popping up, the Brazilian strain, the South African strain, those are a little bit worrisome, that you might need another booster shot to kind of get some added protection from those. But by large, this is a very effective vaccine. When you look at really what's the right endpoint, does it prevent severe disease and death? Yes. Yes. So that's really, can you deal with some mild, flu or cold-like symptoms? Yeah, anybody can. We're used to having cold viruses around every year. I think really, in my mind, what really will, again, move the needle is we've got to be able to vaccinate kids, school-age kids. And I don't know why this happened, but why they didn't start these studies in children once they determined it was safe, why they didn't start them. I'm going to throw it out a year ago, right, when they started the other studies. And that's a bit disappointing in my opinion, because you have a big chunk of the population that is not eligible. And even now, I think one of the companies is looking at going down to 12 years old. That's still not, we need to go down to school-aged kids. 5 years and up. And that's what really changes this.
I guess that's the only good thing about this virus is it didn't target, I have a 3-year-old, and how it doesn't target the kids, or really, I know there's been some cases where, inflammation, or whatever, but, for the most part, it hasn't affected them. So whoever conspiracy theory alert, whoever made this vaccine in a Chinese lab, at least they left the kids, I'm joking.
Yeah.
Corona people, I'm joking about that conspiracy. So anyway, so how many vaccines are you going to do today?
We're off today, which
you got a day off.
Yeah. So we're planning for the next big pod. Who knows? I think the new number that's stuck in my head, to be honest with you, we've achieved 10,000 in a day. The new number that's in my head now is, wouldn't it be cool if we could vaccinate 1% of Oklahoma's population in a day, which would be 40,000 people in a day. And that would be really cool. And I think there's a means to do it. It's organizing and planning.
And I know I didn't get it. I know it can be challenging right now for people to get scheduled to get on this stuff. And I assume that'll get easier as time goes on. But if somebody wants to register for a pod, it will take some personal responsibility and some kind of go get 'em attitude, I think, to get scheduled for this stuff. But if people want to participate, do all this, where do they go? How do they go through that process?
Yeah. So if you go to immylabs.com, that's IMMYLABS.com. That's how you register to make an appointment at one of our pods. You cannot go through the state's portal to make an appointment there. The other thing, so really that serves one particular population. You've got to be computer literate to be able to do that. And I recognize that not everybody is. But I'll tell you that even calling like the 211 with the Department of Health and giving your information and letting them help schedule your appointment, that is happening into our pods. So
Okay.
call 211 if you don't know how to operate a computer. They will help you get an appointment. But if you know how to operate a computer, keep watching. Follow us on social media. That's how we've been announcing our pod openings, and then also just troll our website. I think that's another way you can find out.
If you can get a PS5, you can schedule an appointment for the vaccine. So
this is true. Yeah.
Well, thanks again for coming on. Maybe someday we can have you on and we can talk about the exciting world of laboratory diagnostics and all that type of stuff someday.
Someday we'll see. Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you all,
and enjoy your Chick-Fil-A.
All right, definitely.
All right. See you.
All right. See you all. Bye-bye.